All right, ladies and gentlemen, the weekend has arrived, and we've got a lot to talk about, as always, in the world of professional wrestling with our guest. And he's actually got some matches to talk about that he was involved in recently, also a future match to talk about it, maybe even a match where his tag team partner and best friend was victorious in last weekend, plus maybe even a movie or two of note. He needs no further introduction, but because he has been a staple on Sportswire Radio for nearly 3 years, we're going to give it to him anyway. So, without wait for it, further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one, the Sports Show for wrestling star here from the LWF. That's Wildfire Nate Reese. My friend, how are you?
Hi, Tom. Synchronized Watches. It is good to be back on the Sports Report. Again, another great, thorough, burning entrance there. It is good to be back. It is Friday. It is a very nice day outside. It's been a lot of celebrations over in the UK, particularly with the King's coronation this past weekend. But we've got a lot to talk about because there is just as much to discuss all about the world of wrestling, just like always. The UK is packed full of great wrestling all the time. And every weekend there's something always to bring up to discuss. And what better way to do it right here on the Sports Report every single Friday.
Absolutely, and I have to give a quick comment to the interstate champion over in Wrestling Championship Entertainment, because he has a funny one here, Mr. James Marshall. I got his young son's attention, so he's got a little baby at home, and because of the intro, he all of a sudden lit up. So we'll have to try. When he's in your chair next week, we'll see how my voice holds up, and we'll be able to hopefully give him that type of introduction. But, I want to start off, actually, Wildfire Nate, with some actually breaking news that broke earlier this past week on the Odyssey Pro Wrestling social media pages, is that you are making your long-awaited return to Odyssey Pro Wrestling. I mean, it has been a hot skip in a minute since you have been back in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and you're going to be wrestling two familiar faces, very familiar faces here to Sportswire Radio. One of them is the KOW World Champion, Lucas Neon, and the other one there is their Showcase Champion and the Ronin, Brian Aidenson, a man who has been here quite a bit on Sportswire, and even Lucas Neon was with us here during COVID. So, I mean, for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, I have a feeling that this very well could be one of those matches that you look at and could steal the show. And tell us why and more, and what we can expect in the ring from you on June the 3rd.
Okay, so back at the Alhambra in Morecambe, June the 3rd, after roughly around 12 months, I'd get the chance to return
I was going to say, it's been about a year almost.
Yeah, to return to Odyssey Pro Wrestling after I faced off against Lance Rivera and was successful. Rolling up Lance previously last time. Lance has again continued to make waves wherever he's been.
Champion, King, yeah, he's done it all pretty much.
This is it. So now we've got a great chance to come, but this time the stacks, they're not necessarily even, they're not necessarily against me, but it's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? A very intriguing dynamic. And as you mentioned there, two KOW luminaries. You've got the champion Lucas Neon, who is absolutely no stranger. He's almost like Odyssey's mascot in some ways. He's kind of the familiar, friendly face that on every Odyssey show, Lucas is there to be cheered. He's not had an awful lot of luck, particularly with tag team partners. Nick Cutter, who is a member of the Wrecking Crew in LWF, them two haven't really worked out well as a tag team, so they've had to finalize their differences in the ring. Then you've got the Ronin Brian Aidenson, their Showcase champion. Then you've got me right in the middle of everything, trying to make waves, trying to come back, trying to find my spot on the Odyssey roster, proving a point. So now there's an awful lot for them to lose, but I've got everything to gain. Now, this is my first time back. I was successful last time. I know Brian Aidenson pretty well. I know Lucas as well. So I've got quite a lot to gain within this triple threat match in which I can prove all sorts of different skills to the familiar faces over in Morecambe.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you a couple of different things on that. But first, James Marshall, our interstate champion, says that there might be some audio feedback on your side. So if there's anything you might want to fix on a technical standpoint, definitely try to do so, because we certainly want to make sure that everybody gets to hear what you have to say here. But while maybe we figure that out, you mentioned Brian Adenson, you mentioned Lucas Neon. Lucas Neon and Brian Adenson, in a way, two very different wrestlers. They go about it in different ways. Brian Adenson, in a way, kind of like a Stephen Cross, maybe with a little bit more of a martial arts background, maybe slightly shorter, but similar in terms of how they approach things in the ring. Lucas Neon is a guy that maybe fits your style a little bit more, per se. So when it comes to two guys like this, how do you kind of prepare for something that you're going to see in the ring here on June the 3rd there in Morecambe?
I think one of the biggest things is that I'm going to prepare like I always do, and that is with the combination of training that I do. As you've mentioned, the Ronin Brian Adenson, he's a martial artist, he's a striker, grappler, submission specialist, technically proficient. Having my jiu-jitsu background, that's what I'm going to have to utilize to lead into this. He tends to do a bit more of a standing game. I'm going to maybe go for more of a throwing game, takedown. Possibly looking into things such as Aikido as well to enhance the takedowns that I could do on Brian Adenson. Then you have Lucas Neal, like you say, a little bit more of a match. I can see the sort of the parallels there, possibly the colourful outfits, the explosive movements that come with each maneuver that we get to perform in the ring. Potentially, maybe I need to switch it up. Maybe I need to counter one style with another. Maybe I could bring my own form of martial arts and my jiu-jitsu background to Lucas, and then bring that explosive action to Adenson. Maybe once, tire him out a little bit, play that rope-a-dope game, just when he thinks he's got a strike and I can dodge and be wary of it, I can grab him, hit one of the suplexes or something a little bit faster, speed it up, just to try and beat him to the pace a little bit better. So that's going to be my idea within that triple threat, is to look at both of those skills that those men have and figure out a way in which I can switch it against them, but utilizing my skills in the ring to ensure that I'm successful in that triple threat match.
Now, I should probably ask you about somebody who has a comment just now who actually has quite a bit of experience with the Ronin Brian Adenson in a couple of different wrestling promotions. He certainly wrestled them quite a bit. That is our champion of Odyssey Pro Wrestling, a man we had on a couple of short weeks ago, the natural-born fighter, R.P. Davis. And RPD says, much deserved, brother. Great to see you back. Nothing like that. Morecambe crowd. That crowd. Listen, if anybody has a chance, go to RPD's Instagram, Twitter, go to his social medias, and see basically what had happened. And when that crowd, the way they erupted, when he finally won that Odyssey Pro Wrestling World title, and he says, we'll be keeping my eye on this one. So I have to ask you then, since RPD has had a lot of experience with the Ronin Brian Adenson especially, and everybody knows your relationship, your long-standing friendship with RPD. Do you ask him for any advice on maybe how to deal with the Ronin Brian Adenson, or what to do and what not to do in the ring?
Absolutely, and more than anything, a lot of sort of footage that can be found of Brian Adenson is in some form of match with RPD, with Ryan. Yep. So it'd be foolish not to study it. I think I need to gain the advice, maybe have that discussion with him, maybe see if he can fit me in for a little training session down at, RP Davis Boxing Gym. I need to big up my strike game and make sure that I can take those strikes. Just as important, sometimes it's that war of attrition. You've got to learn to absorb some of those blows before you can hit the one that you want. But ultimately as well, I know that I need to face it in my own style, my own way. There are lots of different ways in which I can trap and counter some of Adenson's holes, but it's also making sure that I'm wary of Lucas Neon, who is determined to get a win in front of that rabid, fervent Morecambe crowd. And there is nothing like that crowd. It is absolutely insane. You look at any of the footage, particularly with RPD, particularly when Synergy won the tag team championships as well. They are absolutely rabid and cannot wait for any form of action every single time that Odyssey sets sail and is there at Morecambe at the Alhambra, right near the Morecambe beach. So it's going to be one of those big ones that could potentially steal the show. That is my ultimate plan. This has been a year in the making. And ultimately, I want to make sure that everybody remembers, alongside all of these great champions that they now have, alongside all of the conflict that's happened with the Spotlight, and they've got a very big main event.
Absolutely.
But I want Nate Reese to be the name that people remember on the way home. I want them to be the person that next time they're clamoring for. That's the person that they should be cheering, jumping up and down for, ready for the next time that I appear.
Absolutely. And I want everybody to follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Instagram and Facebook at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. Also join their group as well on Facebook, Odyssey Pro Wrestling Fans. Also OPW_UK on Twitter as well. So I want to ask you then another question. Obviously, we know your martial arts background a little bit as well, and we kind of saw a little bit of taste. Maybe, in a way, that was kind of how we're getting ready for this match. But you have a lot to prove. It's been about a year since you've been in Odyssey. And the time you were in Odyssey, we think about the win over the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera, who's gone on to become a world champion. He's become a main eventer. He's a big star. He's certainly the Playboy Prince for a reason. And then before that, you had a match with, speaking of the spotlight, the unforgettable Andre Decker, who's currently also a champion in KOW, and he's going to be in places like Firestar Pro Wrestling and Paramount. He's a champion there as well. So Andre Decker, you think about what you did with him, you took him to the limit. This is a guy that's been a top star, and yet we haven't heard from you in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. I mean, do you have more to lose than anybody else in this match just because of the fact that, think about where you haven't been, and people have been like, Nate Reese, he made such an impression, but where has he been? So do you have, in a way, maybe more to lose than anybody else just because of this could be your chance, maybe even your last chance to make that much of an impression here?
That's a very, very good question, Tom. What a great question. And in a lot of ways, potentially it could be. You know, ultimately, my last match, I won. I beat Lance Rivera in that match. And again, you know, I mean, my head was planted on the stage off the DDT. I managed to find my way back. I managed to roll Lance up. I think people were maybe distracted by some of the other issues that Lance has had, particularly with the commentator Simon Hill and some of the other things that Lance did. So maybe I was possibly seen as an afterthought. And I think that's one of the biggest problems and one of the things that every time I compete, any promotion, whether it's LWS, whether it's Future Shock, whether it's Odyssey, people always recognizes game, as the phrase goes, that I take people to the limit. There's a match, there's always something interesting to see, but it's that next point, isn't it? It's where can I see him next? What happens next for Nate Reese? And this is the thing that I need to get. So in terms of possibly having a lot to lose, yeah, I could, because that could be the last time. That could be that last opportunity. So I need to ensure that not only do I beat one person, I beat two at the same time. And that's the real odds there. And if that's not going to motivate me to do anything, I don't think anything can. Because I have to win. There's no if, buts, or maybe about it. I have to win this match coming back. Otherwise, Odyssey, it might close its doors for me. You've seen the roster of talent. They're exceptional.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You look down that card, Will Carter, Nightmare, Two-Bit, somebody who I have an awful lot of respect for.
Rick Marcus, the Cumbrian Outlaw. Can't forget about him. He's lurking. Synergy. You talked about Synergy before. Tonga, Alexis Falcon. I mean, the roster speaks for itself. I mean, we've even seen some crossovers in the LWF. Anthony Getsky now. I guess we can call him Anthony Getsky these days. I mean, we've seen, listen, Isaiah Quinn. I mean, Nate Reese. We've seen him. A huge part of Odyssey, seen him in the LW. I mean, the roster speaks for itself. It's literally, it's as good as any roster that I've seen in the UK.
This is it. And any Northwest luminary, any talent that's been in any of these shows, in any of these promotions, they all end up in Odyssey. They all appear in Odyssey in some form or another. So to stand with peers of that established nature, that's crucial. That's pivotal for me. And if that's not going to help jumpstart the next part of my career, then nothing will. This is why I have to make this work. There is no if, buts, or maybes. There is no tomorrow with this. I have to win this match.
And we definitely think you got a very good shot to win. I want everybody to follow Wildfire Nate Reese on Instagram at Nate_Reese_wrestling. Also Facebook, Nate Reese Wrestling. And let me ask you, though, one other question, slightly deviates off your match. We'll definitely talk about it certainly in the next few weeks, obviously between now and June the 3rd. But I did want to ask you, because you kind of touched upon it. You mentioned the spotlight. There's this whole thing in Odyssey right now about control of it, because it's kind of jointly shared by Chris Brooker and Ethan Edwards. We kind of saw how it all played out at War on the Shore with Ethan Edwards and Andre Decker in a match. But now we're going to have a match, which obviously they're going to announce tomorrow the participants in this Team Brooker versus Team Edwards. Now, I know that you're going to be busy with Lucas Neon and the Ronin Brian Adenson, but you have any thoughts on this? You have any speculations on who might be on the different teams? I mean, obviously, there's a lot to be on the line here, and this could really maybe even change your fate, but certainly even RPD's fate. He's our current champion, because obviously if Mr. Brooker gets full control, I'm sure he's going to make his life a living hell. But if Ethan Edwards stays in power and resumes full control, maybe that even gives you a better shot at staying in Odyssey. So you have any speculations on where this goes and where this might end up in terms of participants and the overall outcome of the match?
Well, in regards to the current status quo, obviously once the spotlight was shattered, if you will, with Reese and Rogan being defeated last time, and obviously RPD defeating Ryan Hunter, it's funny how the signal fire was finally lit for Wildfire Nightmares to return. I don't really believe in coincidences. I certainly feel that had one complete detrimental effect onto the other, and it added that. And as an aftershock, I was able to return to Odyssey Pro Wrestling. In regards to this match, then, I feel like Reese and Rogan would certainly be the first two you would think of to potentially represent Chris Brooker in the spotlight. Ryan Hunter, is he going to be there? Well, is his confidence shattered? He's been champion for an exceptionally long time.
He was more comes John Cena. I mean, we've talked about it when RPD was here right before the match. And, I mean, you have to wonder what is going on through the mind of Ryan Hunter, because he did everything he possibly could to cling on to his spot, and now he's lost his spot.
That's it. He was seen almost like a folklore sort of legend or hero over in Morecambe for several years, even before sort of the COVID pandemic. So for that to have now dissipated and it's gone, has he been pushed too far? Will he be able to rally back and represent the spotlight? I do believe Reese and Rogan will be, because those two bruisers are always thirsty for a rematch, they're thirsty to come back to make sure, and that after being beaten by Synergy, they're going to be furious. They're going to beat down anybody that they get their hands on. Andre Decker, that's a tough one. We know, like, I know him just as much as anyone. He doesn't really play very well with others, does he? It's not really been his strongest suit. So can he coexist on a team alongside Chris Brooker in the spotlight? Or is what Decker wants going to take over a little bit more than what Brooker wants? That's a key factor into this match.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough call. I think you make some valid points, but then where do you think Ethan Edwards goes?
That's very, very good in itself, because ultimately Ethan did pin Decker last time at War on the Shore, which is
yes, he did.
Huge upset. Now the question is, he is captain this team. Is Ethan going to choose to put himself in the match?
I mean, I get that he's got a little bit of training experience, but if he really wants to hang on to power, if I was Ethan Edwards, now again, I don't think Ethan Edwards is going to really take my advice that seriously. Neither would Mr. Brooker, because I've had a couple of brief encounters with Mr. Brooker in the past, and Ethan has been on Sportswire a few times. If I'm Ethan, I automatically go right off the bat. I go for RPD, and then I figure out who else I'm going with.
Number one pick, of course you do.
And I would think Synergy, run it right back, Synergy, Reese, and Rogan. I mean, that's the way I would go.
And to be fair, potentially, depending on sort of the status of this match, you could have all three members of Synergy, which could be something that could counteract Reese and Rogan. They've often prepared for combinations of whether it's Troy, Ryan, Anderson, Daniels,
in the LWF quite a bit. I mean, it's been something that we've seen. We've talked about it here on Sportswire many times.
Nothing worse when they switch and you don't know, isn't it, Tom? Yeah, but with this team, that could be a key factor. That could be something different. Or do they look for somebody else? Do you find a wild card? Again, there's plenty on that roster. Do you find somebody like a Will Carter who's gaining traction, independence, confidence as a competitor for the first time? Do you pick somebody like Sam Bailey, an established legend who, he may not necessarily have the same goal in mind as everybody else, but he's very, very well established and very much iconic within the Northwest and the UK scene? Do you go for somebody like Rob Drake, who's continuing to make waves and continuing to reestablish a brand?
And the Drake family name speaks for itself, obviously.
That's it. And if you talking about myself wanting to create a name and an impact myself, there's nobody hungrier than he is. Ultimately, to showcase just what he brings to that legacy and that lineage.
And I would even say conversely for Mr. Brooker. I mean, somebody we talked about 10 minutes ago in the Playboy Prince Lance Rivera could be a candidate for his team. I mean, that's a name out there that might actually have some linkage there. I mean, we have to see. We'll have to find out. But definitely stay tuned to Odyssey Pro Wrestling social media is coming up here. Again, Odyssey Pro Wrestling, Instagram, Facebook, Odyssey Pro Wrestling fans group as well on Facebook. Also, OPW_UK. And again, my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, and we are speaking all things related here to Wildfire Nate Reese. And I also want everybody to follow the LWF at the LWF Wrestling on Instagram, also LWF on Twitter, Facebook, also YouTube. Check out a lot of stuff going on with the LWF. We're going to be talking about it here undoubtedly over the next few weeks. And if you like what you hear from us on Sportswire Radio, please give us a like and follow on Facebook at Sportswire Radio, YouTube at Sportswire Radio, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. We are going to have more coverage here throughout the week, especially when it comes to somebody that was briefly in the LWF next Thursday, Bentley. Bentley is going to be wrestling next weekend for the GT Ministries World title against Disciple, and kind of also that we heard about Team Brooker and we heard about Team Edwards. It's almost Team Bentley and Team Disciple, and whoever wins, it basically decides who gets the outcome of the championship. So kind of almost the same scenario there. We'll talk about that Thursday night, 8 o'clock British Standard Time. But for now, we are speaking all things related here to Wildfire Nate Reese. And Wildfire Nate Reese, speaking of things I had a chance to see not too long ago, and while I don't know where you are in the future of this, I had a chance to see your match against Brack Strong, and we'll we'll talk about that for a few minutes. And certainly it was a match that continues to show why you should be showcased in company after company.
I appreciate that, Tom, and thank you very much for watching that match. It's a match that, obviously, when we spoke about it, it was something that I'd been working to for a significant amount of time. To return on the 5th of March to Future Shock Wrestling after a 7-year hiatus, that was something that had a long-term goal of mine that I wasn't necessarily sure would come to fruition, so it was a big, big deal for me. And in terms of big, big deals and big, big opponents, there's nobody bigger on that Future roster than Brack Strong, who went toe-to-toe trading barbs with Big Damo For the Love of Wrestling. Mm-hmm. Formerly a member of Sanity and WWE NXT. So, he's one of the strongest, one of the biggest men on the Future Shock roster. Everywhere he goes, he's keen to hunt down any opponent that he can and inflict his own form of pain on them. I know there's a clip going around at the moment in the reel where he powerbombed a little part of my soul right out of my body.
I was waiting for that moment. We're going to talk about that spot in the match that a lot of people have certainly seen on different social media pages. Yeah, so I mean, I'm surprised you were able to get up afterwards.
It was, but again, when you've waited for something for so long, and this is longer than the pandemic, this is longer than COVID, this is longer than realizing everything is Wildfire Nate Reese. This was something that I've been needing in my life from a young man to an adult. Future Shock Wrestling I trained with at 16.
I remember we spoke about that at the beginning a couple of years ago. Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, some of those moves, I do feel bad. You can see some of the crowd members wincing at some of the blows that I had to take courtesy of Brack Strong. But it was also a great showcase in the sense that nobody else has really taken him back and forth a little bit more to the limit than I did. But I used veteran experience. I used technical proficiency to wear down his arm, to bring him down to the ground, to lock in the submission holds, to trap the Hunter, ultimately. And it's an offensive strategy that nobody else has done with him. You look at any of Brack's matches, Star Killer Dave Birch, tremendous talent. Eitan Steen, LWF champion.
Yep. Mr. Eitan Steen. Good old Eitan Steen.
Again, excellent high flyer, daredevil. But again, the strategy that they tried to implement, this hit and run method, or the diving onto Bryce Strong, it's not been working. So I had to try and do something different to try and oppose that brute force, because I tell you, once he grabs you and once he throws you, there is no soft landing. It is a complete collision. And I know there was a back suplex onto the ring apron that went all the way down the spine. There's the powerbomb ultimately. I was fortunate enough to work my way out of a chokeslam attempt from the second rope and hit Bryant with the top rope Hurricane Rana, which again, nobody expected to see that from me. Nobody expected that, least of all him. So being able to catch him off guard and to try and lay him just in there, and more than anything, I think I dented his pride just that little bit. So I'm really hoping that Leon Gray, who's competing against Bryant Strong tomorrow at Future Shock,
Leon very well.
I hope he's able to study, again, tremendous talent, excellent tag team and made to last. I hope he's been able to look at each match that Bryant's had and figure out what strategy will work for him. Because for me, I truly believe if you can irritate and infuriate a talent like Bryant Strong, somebody who, again, very proud of the punishment that he inflicts, if you can throw him off, that's just key to victory. That's your way in. That's your opening. Whether you roll him up, whether you knock him out with a shot, whether you are able to lift him or inflict some sort of move that drives him down to the canvas, that's going to be your way in. And that's the key to beating somebody like the hunted Bryant Strong.
Okay, so obviously this was a match that, no question, again, you do what you usually do in the ring. You certainly got yourself where you get a great match here, and it's a match we're talking about, and we just spoke about an Odyssey, though, where an Odyssey you had last year, all these great matches with Decker, Playboy Prince Lance Rivera scored a victory over him. So where do we go from here, then, with you in Future Shock Pro Wrestling? I mean, where do you think? This is something we've spoke about with you many times on how much it means to you to have been back in Future Shock, a place you've wanted to go. We talked about the past when you were there. Now you're here at this point. Where do we go from here with you?
One of the nicest compliments I've ever received can also possibly be one of the greatest cons to describe my career, and that they call me a Renaissance man. Sometimes maybe a jack of all trades, but sometimes that can be referred to as being a master of none. So now this is the time for me to gain that momentum by ensuring that I'm gaining as many pinfall victories or submission victories. Again, whether it is I need to really look back at how I can create new ways to entrap my opponents in the burnout crossface, whether I need to figure out new ways to catch them with an explosive move that they don't expect. Because hands down, that was probably the greatest moment of potentially taking the victory from Bryant Strong. When I caught him with the chest burster when he wasn't expecting it. That's one of my greatest strengths that I always try and do, is to catch opponents off guard. Now, leading into the next couple of months at Future Shock, it's always go. There's Danger Zone this weekend. There's also the Gold Rush Championship match coming up. Royal Rumble style coming up very soon. Different venue, Manchester Met. I'd love to go there. I've worked with a lot of students that currently go there.
Yep.
So, there's 30 competitors in that match. Who knows? Maybe Nate Reese could be one of those and could, again, have a standout showcase as part of that match.
See, I feel like, though, if you look at what you've done, your body of work in the past, 7 or 8 months in the LWF, where now we're starting to see Crossfire's getting victories. We're seeing Stephen Cross, your best friend, even wrestling in other places, and actually made somebody tap out not too long ago. That's a champion currently, a tag team champion in the CWE. And you guys have started to gain that traction. You guys have started to gain where I think in other companies, you guys should be getting used, especially you, because of the type of matches that you bring out. You bring out the best in people. I still contend the best match I've seen Andre Decker have is with you. You talk about Brock Strong, and this is a guy, again, I could arguably say you had one of his more memorable matches. Lance Rivera became a world champion literally right after you wrestled him. I mean, so at the end of the day, look at what you've done in the LWF. I mean, listen, I mean, Nathan Gunn. I mean, we've talked about you and him back and forth for months. We've talked about what you guys have done in the tag team situation, kind of hanging around the edges here of the tag team championship. I would even dare say that you gave Synergy the best run for their money. So I would hope that Future Shock Pro Wrestling is listening, but I would also hope that many other pro wrestling companies are listening because of what I have just said that you have done in the ring. And speaking of what some of your best friends, your particularly best friend in the whole wide world has done, Mr. Stephen Cross. I talked about it a couple of seconds ago here. Last weekend, I saw him wrestling outside in this really small ring, and he was teaming up with some guy that I know very well from Bolton Town Wrestling and GT Ministries called Maverick Matt Williams, who for I guess literally about what's left in my big gulp was the Bolton Town Wrestling World Champion there, and he's going to be wrestling next weekend over in the Fountain Church in Bradford for those tag team championships, and they got a victory, by the way, over the Modern Day Mafia, Joel Cobra and Dave Douglas, and Mr. Cobra was on Sportswire Radio last week, and they're one half of those CWE tag team champions. So I got to talk to you about, I mean, how did you feel watching your best friend there, Stephen Cross, get a victory, a huge one over the Modern Day Mafia alongside Maverick Matt Williams?
So Stephen Cross, one half of the greatest tag team in Crossfire, my best friend, got to team with another person, tag teaming with another man, leading to a victory. We talked about the fact that he made somebody tap out. I think my heart tapped a little bit in just could have been. But in all sincerity, again, it's another showcase for Cross to bring his skills and get himself noticed as well. Ultimately, Crossfire is greater than some of its parts, but I need to gain experience by myself. He needs to gain experience. So then when we get to go to places like the LWF and we can truly ridicule anybody that they want to put in front of us and continue to gain those victories, whether it's Moon Bear and Nathan Gunn, whether it's, again, looking at the goal of getting back to Synergy, because I do believe that we did take Synergy to the limit. It was only their last-minute substitution that, again, changed the game plan a little bit. But now, again, gaining that traction, that greater experience. And to be fair, you mentioned that ring was small. That's just because Stephen Cross is so jacked. He just covers half the ring with mass.
He was more, but I gotta say, I mean, he held his own though against Joel Cobra and Dave Douglas. I mean, those guys aren't chopped liver. I mean, I've had Joel Cobra on last week, and I've had him on 4 times on Sportswire. Joel Cobra is no joke. I mean, Cross really held his own with those guys. I mean, he didn't look at all uncomfortable, and in fact, he was giving it back just as much as they usually give it in the ring. It was almost I hate to say it because I love the Modern Day Mafia just as much as I love you guys, but Cross kind of gave them what in some companies, especially what the Big Cheese Logan may have to say, gave them a dose of their own medicine.
Absolutely, and I think people maybe misinterpret Cross sometimes. He has those big biceps, but again, he's not just strong in the gym, he's a strong striker.
Yes.
Whilst he was technically proficient.
Those chops. We've talked about it. Those chops, listen, I mean, I would argue they're as good as anybody's in all of wrestling.
This is it. As soon as he grabs somebody and he wants to hit them, he's going to hit them. He's going to hit them hard. And that is his strategies of victory. It may be very different to mine, but that is why we work. That's why we complement each other. That's why we're a tag team built on trust and honesty, which is why he teamed with other people at different times and doesn't call me back. But again, this is showcases all the skills that he has. So this is why, again, the more we get exposure, whether it's the singles, whether it's a team, this is why we are on the periphery of greatness, looking down. And ultimately, it's just a matter of time and a question of when. And so when we get further exposure, just like we feel like all this work's starting to pay off now, everything that we've done, and make no mistake about it, yeah, I know I'm driving crazy. But Crossfire is something that I've thought about for an incredibly long time to work as a team. There was one person that I knew would work as a team with me, whether he liked it or not begrudgingly, it was going to be Stephen Cross. And we're now seeing the fruits of our labour really starting to gain prominence there.
Well, I'll tell you what, after the last match you guys had, the LWF with that victory over the scenario Nathan Gunn and Moon Bear, in a way it seemed like maybe he was slowly getting there, slowly acknowledging what you've done and how you guys are Crossfire and you guys are best friends and he is your best. So maybe, I mean, it was small, very small there. But I would certainly say that you guys are much more on the same page than Moonbear and Nathan Gunn were. And obviously, Mr. Gunn was supposed to have joined us tonight, but he has some technical difficulties. So we will try to reschedule him, hopefully, some point later in the month. So we'll have to see what Mr. Gunn's side of the story. I think everybody's kind of waiting to see what Nathan Gunn has to say about what he did to Moonbear, but that is here nor there. But, I had to ask you because I saw a couple different things. I kind of referenced in a way one of them. You had that little martial arts video you mentioned also going John Wick style and obviously our very good friend Mr. Jake Davis, and he talked about seeing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I saw it last weekend, and I'm hoping to see it once again this coming weekend here. I had to ask you, I mean, any impressions of some recent movies? I almost feel like in America there used to be a show called Siskel and Eve. We're not going to say we're a Bryce and Reese when it comes to movie reviews, but I'm back obviously watching. Maybe we could. You have a background in film, and I actually was in, I think, 2 short films somewhere. It's out there on YouTube, so I actually do have a little bit of a experience in that type of world. But I had to ask you. So first of all, what was your impressions of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
Okay, so ultimately, I was an emotional wreck. No, while I was watching it, no, it was an excellent film.
Yes, I agree with that. That I agree.
Very satisfying. I know that a lot of people have had discussions about Marvel Phase 4 that was mainly distributed through Disney Plus and Marvel Phase 5, and that they've had discussions that they felt some of the visual effects haven't been up to standard, or that the stories of the characters aren't as nuanced, and that since Endgame or Spider-Man No Way Home, maybe at the maximum, things haven't quite worked out the right way. Guardians of the Galaxy was excellent. It was a very, very satisfying conclusion. I really like to watch movies and engage with movies for characters and their story arcs.
Absolutely.
And that's why, as much as I appreciate horror films in the sense, I sometimes don't engage with that as much just because there's no character arcs.
Yeah, there's no like depthness to it. I've always been horror. I'm very I'm very limited when it comes to watching a horror movie. No disrespect to anybody that might watch it, but I need something. I need kind of like content almost.
It's the investment in the characters, which is
absolutely
ultimately hands down why so many of us are started off as wrestling fans as well, because we had a personal investment in, whether it was as a youngster myself that received a Hulk Hogan VHS and was invested in him, or Mr. Perfect or the Macho Man, to maybe those in the 2000s who were deeply invested in, say, the Hardy Boys, for example.
Yes, Edge and Christian.
This is it, The Rock, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Undertaker and Kane, Mick Foley. A large portion. You could pick anybody, really, can't you? And a large portion as a wrestling fan is to watch your favorite rise through the ranks and potentially become in the main event or to become world champion. Think about like Edge, Eddie Guerrero, those sorts of guys that.
Eddie Guerrero is a great one. I mean, I was on yesterday with a bunch of guys, and they were talking about one of the wrestlers I had on. Said he basically the reason he wanted to be a wrestler, he met Eddie Guerrero, and he talked about the Eddie Guerrero promo right before No Way Out. Eddie Guerrero is a great example.
This is it. So, and again, we all have a favorite. We all have that investment, and I feel that with these movies as well, and we have been spoiled a little bit. It's not necessarily 3 movies. It has potentially been 6 if you include 7 with the Christmas special ultimately, but it's 3 main movies that have a very clear through line with each other. If you go back and watch, there's actually so many hidden references and elements that actually link from the first film right through to the third film. I believe there is a secret code. So movie fans and aficionados keep a look at every time there's a location, there's a series of coordinates that actually provide hints and references, not from all the way through to the third film. This has been an arc that director James Gunn has been very clear he always wanted to do. My favorite character in those films, Rocket Raccoon, they finally got to disclose all of his origin story, which was incredibly powerful, as daft as it sounds, for an anthropomorphic raccoon from space. You actually truly felt for him the way that you would when you watch something like Schindler's List. And just every character received something that you really cared about, and it felt that they all went their own way in really good place, and the character arcs are really satisfying. and there's still a lot of room for growth, and that they can move on and do different things. But it felt really rewarding to actually sit and watch this film and watch these characters grow and change as you think about when you first met them. And
Yeah, absolutely. The visual effects. I mean, the visual effects for this movie. I mean, because I was saying to you off the air, and a couple other people on Facebook messaged me about it, whether it was on my post or direct message. Seeing this movie in real 3D made this movie like 10 times better. I mean, I would recommend to see it, regardless. But seeing that movie in real 3D was like unbelievable.
This is it, and I know that the films are often praised for the soundtrack and the use of diegetic sound. And
soundtrack, I don't want to go too off on it. It wasn't my most favorite soundtrack compared to the prior. I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
I wasn't as into the soundtrack as much as maybe other people were. Like I didn't I don't know, didn't move me as much, the soundtrack on this one.
I think maybe the song at the end, which I didn't expect to think about as much or care about as much, that it was very cool actually for the ending. But I know what you mean, because especially with the way that these films have sort of really revived like the notion of classic rock, or the use of soundtracks in movies and how they're really promoted and utilized on screen. If it wasn't for the first Guardians of the Galaxy, you wouldn't get films like Atomic Blonde that really promote themselves through the use of this soundtrack to create an era or nostalgia, or even like the Bumblebee movie where there are certain songs from 1980s that are very prominent within that. It's very much a key thing that Guardians has changed throughout filmmaking. Look at how many trailers utilize this now and create this source of nostalgia, and how many films are sort of starting to go back to being set in the 90s.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I think about it now. Well, the 90s are like over 20 years old now. You think about it when you're growing up. Well, I mean, you remember as a kid, it was like the 70s are kind of like what the 90s are now, because the 70s was like it was just okay. It's like 20 plus years, like in like the 90s into the early 2000s. But now, if you're growing up and today is 2023, like 1997, 98, 96, and so on, you're talking like 20 plus years, and even in some cases like 30 years old. So now that's totally like how as kids we might have viewed the 70s. And
and it's that sort of that nurturing, that yearning for pop culture. I literally went to a supermarket just before I came home after the gym, and the British luminaries, for better or for worse, for music, the Spice Girls, were actually on the radio.
Yep.
And a young girl who was around, I assume sort of 14 to 16, was arguing with a parent because she thought the song was really cool, but hated the notion that her mother knew who it was. And and it's completely the same that I would have felt when I was arguing with my uncle over the Jam, and the 80s, that he had all the cassette tapes of the Jam, and he was actually really cool, and I never was.
Well, it's so funny you say that now, because if the mother would have to be like 40 by now, like maybe like even early 40s, and that's like it's nostalgia now. And Spice Girls is, that back in the day almost.
This is it, and I work with young people, I work with teenagers, and it's so depressing seeing fashion recycle in some ways. They're wearing bucket hats again, and they want to talk to me about that TV show called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They ask me if I've ever seen it, and this sort of thing. The Simpsons has become a little bit more sort of resuscitated again through nostalgia.
Yeah.
Friends is always sort of prominent there.
On my Instagram, like for whatever reason, like every day I have for whatever reason it pops up. I have no idea why. Like an IG video of a clip of Friends. I don't know why it happens, but yeah, Friends is total nostalgia now. Friends is like 20 years ago was the last show, right? And 30 years ago almost it debuted. I mean, that's like totally like nostalgia.
This is it, and I don't know, it's almost a little saddening that, when my dad was a young man, the most prominent thing he watched on television was the moon landing. And for us, it probably was the highest rated thing at the time on television, was the last episode of Friends. I mean, it's still very popular.
Although I have to say, before I get to one of our friends who obviously has done some artwork for you, I was never a big Friends fan. I did not really get the whole Friends vibe. It was just not my thing. It was kind of like, how can I put this without being, too controversial? It was almost like, how can I put it, like white, like sophisticated, like yuppie-ish, like kind of a group of people. I don't know. It just didn't relate to me. I never related to Friends.
This is it, Again, obviously, British humor and the US humor is very, very different.
Sure.
So again, I'm like the situation comedies that again still very popular over in the UK, like Faulty Towers and my favorite Only Fools and Horses is very much based on sort of relatability with characters. And this is why, again, they were so popular. I think when we talk about movies, like a lot of it's entrenched now in nostalgia in the past, is partially because of narrative structure. You know, when you think about if you make a film nowadays, you can't have somebody go missing because they're tracked immediately on their mobile phone. They talk or their message, if they're in danger immediately. So it creates a sense of peril that they can go to the mysterious house in 1992 in wherever. And it creates
although some may argue that Hollywood has run out of ideas here, and obviously one of our friends, Mr. Jake Davis, and huge shout out to Jake, and he says me and Nate always talk about the past. Well, I feel like if you're a movie fan, if you're like a movie buff, I mean, most of Hollywood is basically regurgitating like the past anyway, because it's almost, as some would say, they've run out of ideas. I mean, that might be one way to look at it. So I always look at it. I used to say this when I used to do a podcast on movies. That's what I would always say. We would ask, my co-host at the time would say, well, why do you think Hollywood has done certain things? And I'm like, well, because there really is very little originality at this point. So maybe that's my explanation. I don't know about you.
They often say that the world consists of 7 stories in sort of a narrative structure and template. And potentially it could be hard to adjust and adapt and change that. I appreciate why people say that because there often seems to be a lot of remakes. I know, like, for example, I'll never watch the Total Recall remake. And that's no offense to anybody involved in that film, but just, I'm never going to watch it. Like, Arnold's Arnold.
Yeah.
No chance. I shudder to think of anybody who ever thinks that a Back to the Future reboot would be a good idea, because it doesn't need to be. It needs to be left completely alone. You can look at sort of Star Wars and how, if you chart it from 1977 to Rise of Skywalker, was that 2018?
2019.
Okay, 2019? So, and again, like, they have that reoccurring recycling of elements. Hollywood, even from like the 40s, was repeating things.
True.
You think of like Night of the Living Dead, and that was ended up being.
Well, I mean, Batman's been done like how many times has Batman been done at this point? Batman, Superman's been done so many different times. I mean, so yeah, I guess. But I do have to ask you, there is one movie, I know we might have spoken about it before, that's actually kind of one of the few original ideas that I'm always excited about is John Wick. And before I get to closing thoughts, I kind of saw you mention John Wick there on Instagram and Facebook. So maybe that's how you're preparing for Brian Adenson, is because you're kind of been practicing in that John Wick style. So maybe you're going to go John Wick on Brian Adenson and Lucas Neon, and that's kind of how you're going to get the job done here.
I am a big fan of sort of the John Wick takedowns, particularly, he utilizes a lot of Aikido, a lot of additional form of jiu-jitsu. I study Tekigyu and teach Tekigyu jiu-jitsu, which means adaptable. So I'm very fortunate that I can look at all of these different styles. And, you think of movies of, particularly since, like, I would say the Jason Bourne films, where there's been a real push on martial arts stylings again, whether it was like a screamer being used in Batman Begins, whether it's been, again, Jason Bourne did a lot of hand-to-hand combat scenes, movies like The Raid as well, which is an excellent film that might go a little bit under the radar. And it's showcasing what Hollywood, they're engaging with martial arts culture again, which hasn't been since sort of the 90s, when you had Jean-Claude, you had Seagal, you had those sort of Chuck Norris even, you had these different action heroes and different martial arts styles.
Yeah, Chuck Norris, Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Trying to think who else was big in the 90s for martial arts. What's that?
Mario Van Peebles again, this deep
cut. A little bit, yeah. Wesley Snipes, I think you have to mention Wesley Blade. I think that's probably, that was the one I had to throw out there. Obviously, Triple H was in Blade 3 there. And also, I want to give Jake a big follow because he has a comment, actually. Official_Jake_D.29. He also says some more artwork to come soon as well. So don't spoil anything for us. Don't tell us anything. But we're looking for...
It's incredible, the amount of artwork he produces, not just for me, for all the people he likes to make work for. He's always got time to speak to people. We literally, speak of nostalgia in the 90s, we were talking about Sonic 3 just before I got the chance to speak to you, and classic video games of our
Yeah,
childhood.
he was posted that he actually was like playing. I think that was like, wow, yeah, Sonic. It's another classic. Other movie that was created has been, I saw the first one in the theaters, but really was way better than I expected. I mean, I was like, wow, that movie was like really, really good. Sonic's on the way. Super Mario Brothers, obviously, that's like that's the big movie out for nostalgia. I liked Mario, but I have to say, I don't want to spoil. I like Guardians of the Galaxy more. I don't know. For me,
That's fair.
Galaxy I liked far more than Mario. Like, I think Mario was cool. Like, but I just don't think, and I don't want to spoil it, Mario didn't have the depthness for me that Guardians had. Guardians for me was like blockbuster, big movie, but still had like a depthness to it. I just was really like I saw Mario twice. I don't know. Like, I liked it. I definitely recommend. I never tell people not to see a movie, but Guardians of the Galaxy, I was just like, I loved it. It had the action, the drama, it had the depthness of the characters, it had just the cliffhangers, just the whole scenarios they were in. But that was like, I loved that movie. I mean, just to me, that was just a great movie. I really liked it. I don't know. But then we have also Transformers is coming out. Another, speaking of nostalgia, and then the one with some people, I guess, are torn on, which I don't even get, is speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, in a way, Vin Diesel is Groot, but he'll be in the next Fast and the Furious movie, which I am looking forward to seeing. Are you going to see Fast and the Furious, the next one? Are you going to see it, or are you kind of down on the series? Because a lot of people I speak to are like, "You're going to see that movie? Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw the last one. Why not?"
I'll probably end up seeing it. I don't mind them again. Like, I think a lot of people may have got a little bit worn of the formula by now in some ways. But again, you've got a heel and then you do the babyface turn at the end. But they're still movies that were made to be watched on this big screen, aren't they? They're made to.
That's the movie. Exactly. That's a movie to me. Listen, like Guardians, like I would definitely see it like on the TV, but I'm the kind of person, like, I love going to a movie theater and I want to go see something, whether it's in IMAX, whether it's in real 3D or Dolby. Like, to me, Fast and the Furious, like if I saw it at home, maybe I'd check it out. But like, I would absolutely like want to go to a theater and get that popcorn and just sit there and whether it's in a lounge chair, whatever it might be, and just watch that movie. Like, that's to me like an event. That's why, like I said, maybe it's not the greatest movie. Like John Wick, I would see like if I was like in a phone booth, I would still watch that. But Fast and the Furious, maybe not. But I definitely want to see that in the theaters. That's just me.
Yeah. And you get to see John Cena again doing some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
For wrestling fans, it's really rewarding. Guardians of the Galaxy, Dave Bautista probably got the best opportunities to showcase his skills within all the Marvel, the MCU films that he's done so far.
Yeah, absolutely. He was like, I have to say, like, he was really good. Like, he was like, in terms of the variety of what his character, again, not spoiling it, he was like, I didn't know what to expect in this movie in terms of what his role was, but, he was really good in the movie. I have to give him a lot of credit.
And I think in terms of sometimes when you need to provide comedic timing or levity, his character was pivotal in that, and actually really
absolutely he was pivotal and again, not giving it away in several scenes of the movie that led to the actual ultimate climax. I mean, he was like, I think he's going to be, I don't know if he's a leading man like a Cena or certainly a Rock, but I think he's going to have a good career as like a bit like side, like secondary actor almost. He'll have a really good career, I think.
And I think actually in some ways, if we were to kind of line them up, who's had not the most significant career, but when you look at Batista, so he's been a huge character in a Marvel movie.
Yep.
He's been in James Bond.
Yep.
He's been in Dune.
Yep.
We were working with Denis Villeneuve later in the 2049.
Yep.
These are like dream films that you could only ever possibly dream about being in, and he's been in them, and he's always been good in them. There's always a really good role for him. There's a reason why he's in those films. So, if he's not the leading man, okay, fair enough. But again, all of his roles are really memorable and significant to the movies that he's in.
No, he's a good, listen, you just rattled off like 5 maybe versatile roles he played. And, like I said, he's not the box office draw that a Rock is or even Cena to an extent, but he's definitely going to have a career where you're going to see him in a lot of pivotal movies where he's going to have big roles. And so definitely going to give him a lot of credit. It's probably the only time you're going to see him do any physical action anytime soon. Obviously, I think his wrestling days are behind him. Cena, you're going to probably see this. Probably the only time you're going to see him is in a movie for the rest of the year. Maybe we'll see him in a ring next year. But a lot to talk about when it comes to movies. A lot to talk about when it comes to what Nate Reese is doing in the ring. We've got a lot of when it came to Future Shock Pro Wrestling. We recapped. We spoke about Odyssey Pro Wrestling, maybe some stuff with Mr. Cross in the works in the future, but certainly go and check out Nate Reese again on Instagram at Nate_Reese_Wrestling, Nate Reese Wrestling on Facebook. And I turn it over to you, my friend, and the floor is yours, and fire away.
Thanks, Tom. As always, great discussion. I feel like we may be just on the cusp of the iceberg there, talking movies. We could.
I'm going to be at the movies. There's a lot of movies I want to see this year. Indiana Jones, Spider-Man, Transformers, Fast and the Furious. I mean, I'm hoping to be at least at the movies, I would say, every weekend between now until, I guess, maybe the end of the summer almost.
This is it. So I'm always happy to have a discussion with all things movies as well. But we are here for the one main reason, that is wrestling. A lot of great wrestling coming up. Big thanks to RPD for coming on the show and commenting. Big thanks to Jake as always. You know, sometimes we get fans and supporters that we don't ever get the chance to meet. We've not met physically yet. I met Jake online through the pandemic, and again, just really solid. I don't want to say fan because I think that's really unfair. Really solid friend. Supported everything I've ever done. Creates wonderful artwork for different people. Support shows like this. Just a really true wrestling fan.
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's a good dude. Always likes all my stuff on Instagram and Facebook. We've become good friends over the past couple of months. So big shout out to him.
This is it. And again, anyone that's been able to see my match against Bright Strong that's on the Future Shock On Demand channel, anybody that's messaged like Vicky, Flaky Flynn Blesser that's supporting, or everybody at Odyssey, she is the number one. Well,
she's messaged me. Listen, she's messaged me on Facebook. She says, "Listen, when are you having RPD on? RPD, Rick Marcus. I mean, Vicky. I mean, those Odyssey fans, they're just so special in Odyssey. Odyssey, I always loved talking Odyssey because Odyssey, they just get it there."
Absolute number one Odyssey pro wrestling fan, Vicky. She's just brilliant. So I know that she cannot wait until June the 3rd. We've then got Future Shock on June the 10th for the Gold Rush. There's a show this weekend called Danger Zone. Definitely check it out. A lot of amazing different talent, a lot of wrestlers on there. A lot of names like we've mentioned that have been on the show or affiliated with us, like Lance Rivera, Bright Strong, Leon Gray, Tony Wright, Sam Bailey, Troy Ryan. So many exceptional talents that are going to be on that show. Then the 17th, we've got the LWF. The LWF have also got a Mutiny show this coming month, and they have already sold out. The LWF is continually making waves in Chorley, really impressing everybody that they're working with. They're also doing some external curricular programs, working with young people with potential different needs. So again, providing wrestling in a different capacity. That's one thing that the LWF is doing, but I cannot wait to be back there with my best friend, Stephen Cross, tuning in, ripping it up, showing up anybody that dares come and challenge us there. Cannot wait to test my mettle in that triple threat at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And I also cannot wait to ensure that people remember me next time they see me in Future Shock as well. So a lot of John Wick training, a lot of cardio, swimming and cycling training, a lot of weight training. I'm going to be a very, very busy guy, but I will not be without the sports report every single Friday, speaking to yourself and everybody out here, Tom.
Cheers to that. And again, one more time, everybody please follow Wildfire Nate Reese Wrestling on Facebook. Also, Instagram, Nate_Reese_Wrestling. Odyssey Pro Wrestling, Instagram, Facebook. Also, OPW_UK on Twitter. And also the LWF Wrestling on Instagram. And also Twitter at LWF, YouTube, LWF, and LWF Television on Facebook and YouTube as well. My friend, we'll definitely talk soon. Definitely talk a lot next week, I'm sure, about some wrestling, some movies, some announcements, and everything else but the kitchen sink. And we're looking forward to doing it again, my friend.
No problem, Tom. Great as always. Thanks very much. Great to see everybody.
Absolutely, and ladies and gentlemen, that was Wildfire Nate Reese. We're going to see on June the 3rd in Odyssey Pro Wrestling's Mutiny Show. He'll be against Lucas Neon and the Ronin, Brian Aidenson. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you're on sportnarium.com/prayer, you'll go back to your regularly scheduled programming. If you're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, we'll be back later this evening, morning time UK, to talk all things related in the world of sports. Thank you, good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, on the number one global radio station that is